is the underconfident human. It's getting sparse with the videos. I suspect my channel will probably be ending soon, just because I really lack the imagination and the ability to come up with good role plays and things, and that's not true, not much my gig anyway. And I think as much ASMR as I've been watching for all these years, I'd have good ideas. But anyways, for now, tonight I thought maybe I would try something that I know I can at least talk about. Now, before I get into the details and some of the things I want to show you, I need to explain first why this video was such a royal pain to come up with. Because I'm talking about music, and music is my lifeblood. It has literally shaped the very person that I am. This obsession with music has existed my whole life. When I was a little kid, I mean 4, 5, 6 years old, I never asked my mom for toys. I didn't really own any toys. Wasn't interested. For me, it was always tapes, cassettes is how we did it at that time. And I had boxes full of cassettes. I mean, tons of music before I was even 10 years old. We could not go to a store without me asking my mom for a new tape. Even if I didn't know what it was, like if it was, as long as it was in the genre, which for me at the time was hip hop, I'd buy it if it looked interesting to me. So, with that deep an obsession with music, you know, you flash forward to right here and now in the basement, I've got, and I don't even know how many CDs I own. I still buy CDs even now, but I collect music. I like owning music. If you've ever watched my channel, you already know my extreme appreciation of vinyls, but all in all with music is just, it's everything to me. Other people's creative outlets and works, I mean, that's maybe how unoriginal I am, but it means everything to me. So I mention all of that because to make this video, I originally was going to do a top 20 most essential albums or artists, and I figured that'd be way too many because this video would be hours long trying to tell stories and just talk about all of those. So then I thought maybe limit it down to just albums instead of artists as a whole, because most of the artists that I'm going, well, yeah, everything here actually I own pretty much their whole discography. Like I'm that kind of collector, okay? And trying to figure out how to streamline and narrow this, I finally got it to the idea of with that classic number of top 10. So I thought I'll do a top 10, but trying to cut out albums and artists that I would want to put in this video, this is why this was painstaking for me. Painful, because there are just tons, there's so many albums, so many people that are monumental to me that got cut for me to try to limit this down to 10, which then became 11 because I kept looking and looking and looking, and there was just the stuff that's here isn't even all of what I think I should have to adequately cover, but I did my best. I really did my best. So it ended up being 11 instead of 10, and they're even somewhat organized in the order of the stories I want to tell about them. So anyways, let me get started. Kurtis Blow, Kingdom Blow. So the thing with this album starts with youngest memories of childhood. My mom was a bartender. A lot of music in the clubs that people would dance to back then. And I was really, really into hip-hop at a young age. At the age of 4, I could recite the entire 7-minute and some track called Jam On It by a group called Nucleus. It was real popular. My mom had a tape that, DJs had made. We called it dubbing tapes, where you record songs from one thing to a blank cassette. But anyways, I was really into hip-hop, and a lot of my younger life was pure hip-hop. So the very first tape I remember owning was either this or Kool Moe Dee's How You Like Me Now, right? And I thought forever that the very first store-bought tape that I had owned was Kool Moe Dee's How You Like Me Now, but not too terribly long ago, I was just chatting with Mom about making this video and ideas, and she remembered Kurtis Blow because he was really hot at the time, but it ended up it was this album. I knew it was one of the two. This was the very first store-bought album that I ever had on cassette as a kid. And I had my own little boombox, and as much as I loved music, and in particular rap, I know I felt cool as hell listening to this tape. So, this was not even, speaking in present day terms, this isn't even my favorite Kurtis Blow album. That one would be called Back by Popular Demand. But this one was the most impactful to me. And I should mention, by the way, some of these I'll be showing you, talking about that artist. It may not be my most favorite album in the modern day, but it's the most important to me, the most historical, or what have you. So anyways, Kurtis Blow. This is number 1 out of the 11 here, because this was the very first store-bought thing I ever owned, like I said, and I used to listen to this like crazy. I know every second of this album. So trying to limit this down was so hard, I'm telling you. It just makes me mentally crazy. Anyways, so around that same age, like maybe a couple years older. And that album, by the way, wasn't new. It had already been out a little while, but it was just the first one I had. But anyways, a key part of my musical journey when I was a kid was actually because of my cousin, Julie. And may she rest in peace. My cousin was a big part of raising me. I loved her, stayed with her a lot as a kid when Mom was working or had other things going on, and just, anyway, her and her husband I was very close to them, and they liked all sorts of music, even country, which, but my cousin had an 18-inch Earthquake Annihilator sub in the back of a Toyota, I think, Tercel, whoever made the Tercel. I just barely remember it, but anyway, he had a lot of tapes, lots and lots of music, and so he'd let me borrow stuff or take stuff and keep it that he didn't listen to anymore or whatever. And thinking back on that time, still at such a young age, a very crucial, critical album that really, out of all, I had a bunch of tapes by this point, but one that really sparked something in me is By All Means Necessary by Boogie Down Productions. The rapper known as KRS-One. Knowledge reigns supreme over nearly everyone. KRS-One. So this dude was a key part of raising me. I have everything that came from Boogie Down Productions, and then when he went solo, I have tons of those CDs too. KRS-One is a monumental figure to me. He is a true godfather, a true king of hip-hop, and he was among those elite that really brought intelligence to the microphone. But anyways, so this was one of the tapes that was in that stack of ones I got from my cousin's husband. When I was a kid, I also called him my cousin. My philosophy, I'm still number one, teacher. This album, I listened to this a zillion billion times as a kid. It was my first real big passion, I guess. Boogie Down Productions was something I really got into after I'd grown up just a tiny bit, like from the Kurtis Blow days. I had lots, I mean, Mantronics. I'm trying to think of what all I know I listened to as a kid back then. Young MC. I had tons of these, like tons of tapes, but I just remember that Boogie Down Productions, By All Means Necessary, was one that really struck me, and that really got me into intelligent hip hop. It's just this album is just very, very classic for me. Very lots of memories and very historical for me, so that's why I chose to include it in the mix here. Next up, another monumental person to me, for sure, Chuck D. Apocalypse 91, The Enemy Strikes Black. CD cases make fantastic sounds, don't they? Anywho, so one thing I had a lot of in my big collection of tapes as a kid was various artist tapes, and I had a tape that had Night of the Living Bassheads by Public Enemy on it. So that was the very first Public Enemy song I ever heard, right? And I thought it was pretty tough. I actually liked the offbeat, like that whole. So by the time I had actually went to investigate Public Enemy a bit, and you got to remember that this is a time when there was no internet. Stuff like this was not really on TV. You just kind of had to, be around people that had the music or go to music shops. But anyways, I wanted to find a Public Enemy album, and what was the newest thing out on the shelf at the time that I actually went to, discover Public Enemy? This one. So this began a crazy obsession. I remember trying to draw this logo with crayons, and even when I was in high school, we had book covers on our books. Even then in high school, I was drawing this logo on everything. Public Enemy, if you're not familiar, and you should be, is another monumental hip-hop group. Chuck D is again, another king, another true legend. This guy brought a lot of consciousness to hip-hop, and actually brought a lot of consciousness, racial and social consciousness, to society in general. It's because of people like Chuck D that I was able to grow up with a far broader, multi-ethnic, multicultural perspective of the world around me, and the struggles and opinions and feelings and emotions, just all these things of other people besides another white guy, right? Like, the world was bigger than that. From such a little age, growing up with Chuck D. So I really have a lot of immense appreciation and admiration for Chuck D. But yeah, discovering Public Enemy was another huge, huge obsession. I just have countless stories and a long history of. I can tell you that anything from, I would say There's a Poison Going On, when that came out in 2000, clear back through Public Enemy's discography, you can't tell me a single album or song title that I don't know word for word. I would take that challenge on in person if it were possible to meet someone that wanted, like, again, another huge one for me. So, part of my history, Public Enemy, unquestionably. Now, on a slightly more emotional note, there's one other hip-hop thing here before I get into a little bit of a later age that I want to touch on that really connected with me in a way that I can't even explain. I mean, this was not boom bap. This was not, hard-hitting, like, banging in the system type of stuff. I never liked gangsta rap, really. I wasn't into the hardcore that much as a kid. I remember like Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg and all them dudes were real popular, and I did not like it. I kind of liked Eazy-E just because he cussed a lot. But I was a little kid, so give me a break. But I didn't like that stuff too much. So unquestionably, one of the most unique, extremely poetic, and personal lyricists I've ever heard. A fella named Lucas Sakan, who just put out his music under the name Lucas. He didn't do a lot of music as a lyricist before he stepped out of that entirely and went into production. In the modern day, and in the last couple of decades, he's been an extremely successful producer. That's what he does. He's a studio man. But he started out as a rapper. And unlike, I don't know how to explain the deep philosophical, metaphysical, introspective lyricism that this dude has. Because when I talk about metaphorical or complex lyricists, I don't mean in the same manner that you would think of like Rakim or whatever. This dude just, I don't know. I think that his music is only cut out for a certain type of mind or a certain type of person, because this is not a record that you would probably find banging in the streets. You wouldn't have had dudes back in this time running around bumping this record in their system. Not that it doesn't have some bumping ass tunes on it, but this was not. It's a whole different level. But this album just really, really connected with me. The one hit single off of this was called Lucas with the Lid Off. If you look it up on YouTube, you can at least listen to the tune. That was the sort of I call it a ditty boppin' tune. Kind of lighthearted and fun, unusual. Definitely, he's got an old ragtime sample that he loops over a jazz beat. But most of this album is just very complex. Like, he's got a song on there called Citizen. Citizen, Z-E-N. Wah, wah, wah. Very personal tune for him. Work in Progress, The Muted Trumpet, Living in a Silicone Dream, Pendulum Swings. His metaphors were so unusual, and I don't know how else to explain this album. It's complex. But the story, how I discovered this, was one of the stores we used to shop at was Kmart, when Kmart existed. And back in that time, they had these things called listening stations back in the electronics section, where you had these big ass can headphones, and you'd put them on and you could push a button, a physical button on the thing, and listen to a couple of 30-second samples from like the newest music that was out at the time. So everything was on there, new releases, and this was one of them. And the first time I heard it, I thought it was cool as hell. So every time we went to Kmart, I went back to electronics, because at that point, I don't know, maybe the world wasn't so dangerous. I used to go off all the time on my own. Mom knew the first place I was going was electronics, and I would stay put because I'd be back there looking through the music. It's when stores sold a lot of music. Kmart had big racks full of cassettes. I mean, big racks, lots and lots of music. So I listened to this all the time, and it took a while, and I finally convinced Mom to buy this tape for me, and she ended up really liking it too, which is awesome. But yeah, this is just another one that I got as a kid and listened to like crazy. I actually got to kind of make friends with him on Instagram. I told him my story, and he's a really good guy. This dude has a really good heart. Yeah, and like I said, trying to explain the music. This was not a dude you heard rapping about, rapping about drugs, rapping about sex, rapping about getting paid, and just it is definitely not in any stretch your typical hip hop record. Like, there's nothing, you can't take any typical hip hop record, anything classic in radio station top tens or anything like that, whatever, and find any similarities with this. This album is just really cool. And yeah, long history with this one. Just a big fan of Lucas, so this belongs in the list of essential history for me. Now, as I got just a little bit older, we're still talking like I'm going to put this around middle school. I had, again, I told you about my cousin with the system. Well, he had bass tapes. It's what we used to call this electronic music that focuses very heavily on sub bass, digital sub bass, and not like modern day grime or dubstep or any of that. This stuff was far more electro oriented. But with bass music, I really got into that too. And remember, I told you that I had tons of music that I wanted to include that I cut out for making just this video. I already had bass tapes, but the very first one I ever owned that got me really hooked on electronic music and got me into that whole obsession with bass and sub bass and systems and speakers, all that stuff. Right here. Bass 305. All-time favorite electronic bass music, like production group artists to this day. I had went to a store. This wasn't brand new at the time I got it, but I'd went to this music shop once and told them, I wanted something with a lot of bass. I remember asking the guys, I wanted a tape that has lots of bass, and this is what he ended up picking out for me. And I don't know, this music really connected with me. It was different than hip hop. The electro bass thing just really got into my blood and became a part of me. It really got me, like I said, bass music and all that's what first got me into anything that was purely electronic, techno, electro, whatever phrase you want to use. And of course the system thing. I was so obsessed with bass and speakers because of my cousin. And I mean, just really obsessed. And I know that by middle school, I know I had a lot of bass music. Like, I had a good selection of tapes. I started collecting those too. And there's a lot of artists in that genre that really had influence on me, impact on me, like Neo Case, who was Beat Dominator, amongst other names. And like Bass Cube and Bass Tech DXJ, and just on and on and on. Tons of that stuff really impacted me. It gave me that taste for electronic music. It all started here. Bass 305. So because this was my first introduction as a kid, not just to bass music, like really owning it, but electronic, purely electronic music that wasn't just straight up hip hop. This was it. So that's why that's included in the list. I own everything that Bass 305 produced under the name Bass 305. Mark and David Watson, who is Bass 305, did stuff under other aliases, under their own record label, DM Records, and I have a bunch of that too. So now, somewhere in here I had to break it off and move forward to high school. High school is when things really changed for me, and I started getting into other music because, you know, at that younger age, it was basically nothing but hip-hop and bass music. Like, I wasn't interested in anything else. I did not listen to any kind of rock. I did not get into metal. Like, none of that. So, trying to make sure I have these in some kind of reasonable order. So coming from high school, the last piece of hip-hop that I want to touch on is the Wu-Tang Clan. And I thought at a younger age that they were just more gangster rappers. I did not take that seriously. I didn't even give them a listen. Like, I was missing out on the most classic, legendary hip-hop of, like, some of the most classic shit from my generation because I had the wrong opinion. And I was very hard-headed and very particular about my music. But the thing that changed that for me, and I guess in terms of years, I'm about to go slightly out of order here, but again, I tried my best to cut these. Beneath the Surface by GZA Genius, or just GZA the Genius. This is a true, like, one of the most classics for me personally. This album is what got me into the Wu-Tang Clan. So this came out in, like, what, 98 or 99? Yeah, 1999. The song Breaker Breaker was the single, or at least one of them, from this album. And that, I don't remember how I first heard it, I think online, but when I first heard that tune, I was like, you know, I just thought it was really awesome. I liked the sound of it. The lyricism was complex and on point, and I was like, who is this guy? Who's GZA? And that led down that rabbit hole. Once I discovered who that was, and he was from the Wu-Tang Clan, I was starting to think, well, if this is how these dudes, if this is Wu-Tang or someone from the Wu-Tang Clan, maybe I need to pay more attention. And then I went backwards. You know, I actually listened to Enter the 36 Chambers and Wu-Tang Forever and so on and so on and so on, and got to know everyone in the group and, you know, their different styles and all that. And that was a big page-turning moment for me because I am a crazy Wu-Tang fan to this day. I love Wu-Tang Clan, and I had no idea what I was missing, all because I had a closed-minded opinion. And this album was the one that changed it for me. I love this album. I own several copies of it as well because I keep one in the car, even to this day. And yeah, so this one's on the list for being another album that really influenced me and impacted me. And I know it's, you know, poor timing because at my age I could have had a exposure to Wu-Tang Clan a lot sooner than I did, but this was the album that did it for me, so it goes in the list. Now, make sure I've got these somewhat together here. Now, of my friends and the people that I hung out with, some of them were into far different music than me, and by the time, you know, high school, when appearance matters and everything matters, everyone nitpicks everyone else for cool points and all that. That's just the way it was. I had friends that were into other things I wasn't. Like I said, most people didn't even know my music because at the time, as far as hip hop goes, at least, No Limit records and Cash Money records, all that stuff was, and DMX and the Rough Rider thing was all huge. Everyone was on that, and I hated all that with a passion. But some of my more eclectic friends, anyway, I was into electronic music quite heavily by this point as well. DJs mixing live electronic music and techno and drum and bass and all that stuff. I had a friend named Keith. Can't remember his last name now. I'd love to find him again, but he was the first one that brought me into a whole other fold that changed my life. And that has to start right here. Prodigy. These guys, so this album was really popular at the time. I don't remember what year this came out. I heard it, it came out in what, 96? 97, and I didn't hear this until the same year I heard KMFDM, which I'll get to that soon. But Prodigy was my first introduction into something a little more, not so electro bass oriented, like Bass 305 and stuff like that, but a little more industrial-ish, This was the first thing I listened to that just didn't fall in those categories. Like I said, real popular at the time, and the way that some of this was a little industrial heavy, but also blended in hip-hop, is what first really got my attention about it. But it really didn't take long for me to get crazy about these guys, and ended up getting more of their albums and all that. But The Fat of the Land is something I always considered my personal introduction into industrial music. If you've watched any of my past videos, you know how much of an industrial music guy I am and have been for decades by this point. But yeah, so this was my introduction into that, something much more hardcore and energetic and gritty. It's an album that really, first small step in really changing my life. Now, while we're at it, the album of albums. So, a tune that I had been introduced to, the very first KMFDM song I had ever heard, if I recall, because sometimes memories can lie, but if I recall, was Megalomaniac. And the lyrics alone got me, let alone the techno beat that it had, like a techno-ish. But anyway, a friend of mine had been listening to that, and I had been introduced to KMFDM that way, and I was like, okay, I like this, I want to hear more. So I went to the music shop. It was a place called Quonset Hut back in the day, that I wanted to go find a KMFDM album and, buy one and listen to a whole album. Rather than borrow my friend's shit, I wanted to get my own. And so this was the album I found a copy of. This was not like a new album at that time. This is from 1996, and I'm talking more about 1998-ish. I think it was 98, or 98 or 99. Trying to remember where I was at in school at that point, because then I would know that. But anyways, this was the album I bought, and I just fell for it. This whole blending of metal, like not metal, but just, it was the first thing I got into, I guess, that, had a some emphasis on electric guitars and still had a lot of electronic, mixed in with it as well, let alone the lyrics. Some of these songs, like Inane, the speech on Dogma, Power, Apathy, KMFDM Rules. Boy, I love that song. But yeah, so this album is definitely on the list of most essential albums that changed my life. And again, referring back to one of the videos I did on this channel ways back of showing off my KMFDM collection, from halfway through high school on, KMFDM has been and always will be my most favorite band ever, period. Like, ever since I discovered them, I've never lowered them on list of favorites. Most favorite industrial band of all time is KMFDM. And it all started because of this album. So, definitely in the list of essentials. Now, speaking of the same friend that introduced me to that, also introduced me to another one that was sort of life-changing for me. Skinny Puppy. So back to my buddy Keith, that had introduced me to the industrial music scene, like, altogether. So that was far more his gig than mine. Like, I was the newbie, but this was, if I remember, his two most favorite bands in the world, groups, were the Beastie Boys and Skinny Puppy, which, believe me, that's an unusual blend. But he really loved Skinny Puppy, and this album here was the one that he had let me listen to. I didn't know what to make of this the first time I heard it. Like, I ended up getting a copy of it myself just a little bit later from that point in time. But it was so electronic and gritty and dark and just badass. Like, it was loud, cranking, just super badass. So I really love Skinny Puppy. I've loved them ever since high school. I don't have all of the Ogre stuff, like Navek's side project. I only have 2 Ogre albums, but I have everything that Skinny Puppy did. And they're not my topmost favorite band. That was Keith's gig, like I said, but this album anyway was another piece of that history that was a game changer for me. And as far as owning the whole Skinny Puppy discography and really being into industrial music, again, this was the album that opened that door for me. This is a genuine industrial classic. Now, we're coming down to the last 2. If you're not asleep by now, like you would expect from a chill video or an ASMR video, then that's impressive. But this was getting really difficult by this point because I still had quite a few discs that I was going to do in this video, and I had to cut it down. So in terms of industrial, an album that really connected with me also in high school years, Frontline Assembly, Tactical Neural Implant. Now, this album, again, having mentioned that I had a history even before industrial music, when I was really into just pure electronic music and all that stuff. Like, this one I had found while I was in high school, so I was already familiar with industrial music. And I would occasionally, when I was out at the music shops, go looking for industrial bands specifically that I had never heard of. I came across this one entirely by accident. It was just a random chance looking at industrial music. I thought the name and the artwork looked cool. That's it. These guys are legends in the industrial music world. Frontline Assembly has been in the game forever, and been making music since the 80s, and they still tour and make music now. But anyways, just being on the hunt at the music shop, I come across these guys entirely by accident, and ended up definitely lumping that into the list of life-changing bands for me. Frontline Assembly's dark electronic industrial goodness just is another part of something that really shaped me, shaped my soul. And one thing I want to say is that there's just so much story, so much personal life that existed. Obviously I was there, that just doesn't matter to anyone else, and you can't begin to explain it all. But in high school, I had issues that I still suffer with. I had anxiety problems, really almost exaggerated, or just next level depression, like a lot more severe than it should have been, because technically I didn't have too many reasons to be depressed, but there's a darkness that I live with that slowly grew through middle school and high school. It's been a part of me. I've went through a phase or two in a lot younger times when I was a bit suicidal-ish. Really thought about it, really thought about it. And so, the dark nature of some industrial music really connected with me. And Frontline Assembly in particular doesn't really, I wouldn't say they write songs that, some of it's really sci-fi-ish and so on, but I never considered Bill Lieb or Reese Fulber to be particularly gothic or, dark, hopeless in nature, or what have you. But something about the sound of Frontline Assembly just really connected with me. This album really got me into these guys, and this album was just one of those, like I said, it was a random purchase that just really, very important to me. This is a very, very special album for me, so that's why it's in the list. I'm at almost 44 minutes here, so I did okay. I guess the last thing that I want to cover is another one of my, definitely I would term them as high on my list of favorite and most essential bands, because they just really, they were there for me, and they didn't even know I existed. Like, it carried me through some times. The nature of this band connected with me, and it just resonated in just the right way. And so I have a very serious appreciation and fondness for Typo Negative. Speaking in the modern day, I'm not even sure what my favorite Typo Negative album is. My impulse is to say World Falling Down, but this Life Is Killing Me was the first Typo Negative album I'd ever heard, I'd ever been introduced to. I was working a job in a warehouse as just a picker and packer, and I had worked with a dude there this was his favorite band of all time. So, meeting a huge fan, he's of course going to have a lot of information, but when we would talk about music, I had already been, pretty seasoned in the world of industrial music. I'm out of high school, by this point, been out for a couple of years. actually. And, you know, I was discussing different industrial bands with him, and he had mentioned, he said, you really need to give these guys a listen. And so I was expecting industrial rock or industrial metal or something like that. And I don't know if I can't totally say for sure I'd even classify Typo Negative as industrial anything, but, I mean, or maybe they are, but just, I don't, when I think of industrial, electronic or rock or metal, I don't know. I'm not sure what you'd classify these guys as, to be honest. But this was the very first Typo Negative album, anyway, that I ever heard. And in particular, with my depression issues and all that stuff, I Don't Want to Be Me, the very title, I was like, I get it. Let alone going through and listening to this. A Dish Best Served Coldly. I just felt every bit of that, especially when it came to the girl that had cheated on me with her ex back then and destroyed me, because I've had very little, you know, I pretty much considered myself an incel because I'm used to pretty much a whole life without any relationship or whatever. And the short time I was with someone, they were bopping their ex, and that just long story. But anyways, Typo Negative, depending on what tune you're listening to, there's elements of humor, and you either get the joke or you don't. And there's elements of fun and just good times, but there's a lot of darkness from Peter Steele too. And I don't know how else to explain it except to say that when I first started actually listening to Typo Negative and listening to this album, I heard the darkness in there, and I heard some of these tunes that just resonated with me, and that started that rabbit hole. So hence why, like I said, Typo Negative is definitely very serious on my list of most essential and favorite bands. And that all started from this album, so that's why I chose to put this one in the mix here. And this is the last one, not just for this video, but in terms of the whole premise of this video today. Because having discovered this just a couple years out of high school, there's music, lots and lots and lots of music, of course, that I discovered after that even, and stuff to the, you know, even newer stuff that really reaches me and that I like, that has, if I like something enough, it sort of influences my taste and my attitude and just whatever. I feel music on a different level. But I chose to stop by this point because that's at least 2 decades ago for me. And, you know, so childhood up to like actual pure adult age. That's why I stopped where I did. But anyway. Nice neon green. It's good old the Green Man, Peter Steele. You gotta love that. Feet. Life is killing me. I get that too. Anyway, so that's it. That is the entirety of my attempt at an ASMR video today. Trying to just, I have that old guy thing going, I guess, because I mean, I'm only 40, but I do love talking about the old days, and especially music. I could easily talk all day on music, going over albums and artists and stuff, but I've probably said it 20 times already, I don't know, but even from the beginning of the video, I just want to reiterate that there's so much emotion and admiration and just different things for albums and artists that I didn't even touch in this video because I really wanted to try to limit it down, like I said originally, to the 10 most influential albums on me, things that shaped my very person. And it ended up being 11 because I gave up trying to get to the 10. Getting to 11 sucked. Like I said, I probably needed at least 30, but I don't want to make a video that even goes this long, let alone hours, like plural. So, anyways, there may be more videos, I don't know. This is just wearing down for me because I have no good ideas. But for the time being, and especially those of you that have hung around and watched my videos and left comments, like, I appreciate it. It really does mean something that someone would be interested enough to listen to the sounds that I'm got going on in my ASMR videos, or just me. Like, I always felt like I never deserved anybody's attention, like I never mattered. I still feel that way. I still really feel irrelevant in this world, in this life, a pointless existence. But, you know, any little bit of interaction and attention from people, if I create something and they respond to it, is nice. So really and truly, thank you to all of you, and you know who you are. With that, I will bid you a good night. And again, this is the Underconfident Human signing out. See ya.